Hi, in this video, we're going to learn a little more about self-concept. A self-concept is defined as a set of relatively stable perceptions that each of us holds about ourselves. So how do we view ourselves? How would we describe ourselves? If you were to describe yourself to somebody, if they said, tell me a little bit about you, what sort of things would you include in that? So this is our conception of what's unique about us, and it makes us both similar and different from other people. You find that if you share those things that you identify in your self-concept, you'll find people who would describe themselves the same way. You'll also find people who would describe themselves differently from you. And this would include things like physical features. It would include also emotional states, so things that we can see and not see, talents, likes and dislikes, values and roles, and it may include other things as well. But this is a pretty good list of the sort of things that we use to identify ourselves. You know, if we say I'm 5'9", and I'm an athlete, I'm usually pretty happy. I'm this, I'm that. I like fruits, but I don't like vegetables. Those are all things that we use to identify our self-concept with. Now, an important part of self-concept is this idea of self-esteem. And there's a difference in those. Self-esteem is how we regard ourselves in light of the descriptions we use for self-concept. So again, if I describe myself as an athlete, would I view myself as being a good athlete, a mediocre athlete, a horrible athlete? As I describe myself as a student, would I be a good student, a bad student, a mediocre student? So that qualitative description or term we attach to the self-concept is our self-esteem. It reflects the way that we view the value of that self-concept to ourselves. So as it says here, it's the assignment of value and worth to traits and characteristics that comprise our self-concept. How do we feel about those things that we would describe ourselves as? It's our evaluation of what's worthwhile or valuable about ourselves. So as I mentioned, good athlete, bad athlete, mediocre athlete, good at playing the drums, bad at playing the drums, whatever it is, it's how you feel about those terms that you use to describe your self-concept. We definitely can see that the self-concept that we have, and especially our self-esteem, plays a part in the way that we communicate with other people. So some of the factors that affect our self-esteem are things like the ways in which others see or react to us. So in another video talking about self-fulfilling prophecy, one of the things that we said influence things about us are the perception that other people have. So how do they see us, right? And that plays a part in our self-esteem. If people don't think that I'm a very good basketball player, that might affect me negatively. You know, I might also feel that not only am I not a good basketball player in regard to creating self-fulfilling prophecies, but I also might in a related sense think that, gosh, people don't like me, that sort of thing, right? So that's part of what affects self-esteem. Also, how we think we compare to other people, and this is referred to as reflected appraisal. When we compare ourselves, like in the public speaking class, I tell students not to compare themselves with other students because some students come into the class with some experience in public speaking. Some students come in with a lot of experience in public speaking. Maybe they competed on their speech team in high school. And then I have students who have absolutely no public speaking experience. And it wouldn't be fair for the students who have little to no experience to compare their performance to those students who have had a lot of public speaking experience. It's not a fair comparison. But people do that. They feel like, gosh, I'm nowhere near being a good speaker because Bob or Susan, delivered this great speech and I wasn't able to do that. That should really have no reflection on how where you're at that time, but people let it affect their self-esteem. Also, things like self-worth. What do we value about our self-concept or self-esteem? Do we care about those things? Do I really care that I'm a bad basketball player or a bad tennis player or whatever, right? Do I really care about that? Even though that, that's kind of the value I put on being a tennis player, do I really care about that, right? And if I care a lot about it, especially about every little thing, then that obviously will often translate into having a low level of self-esteem when people feel like they can't do anything right. But really what they need to do is stop and evaluate, is that really an important thing, or is that an important skill to have? You know, I haven't found that my lack of ability to play basketball has really affected me in the more important parts of my life. All right. People with a solid self-esteem, so in other words, high self-esteem, are people who are more confident about communicating. And I think that naturally makes sense because they're not afraid to face people. They're not afraid to talk to people. They're not afraid to communicate with people. You know, we all probably all know somebody, if it's not you, it's somebody you know that could, as they say, you know, make friends with a fence post because they, you know, they're not afraid to encounter and interact and so on and so forth. But a lot of that has to come from the sense of having some good solid level of self-esteem. And then those people who have a lower level of self-esteem are people who are less likely to communicate, who are less likely to speak up, to engage in small talk and doing those sorts of things, right? Because they don't trust themselves, they don't see themselves as having value, and so why communicate with other people? So, you know, the level of self-esteem that you have really does affect your communication with other people. And one thing to remember as we close out in this video is that just because you do have a high sense of self-esteem, sometimes that's overinflated. And just because you are not afraid to engage in communicating with people doesn't necessarily mean you'll be successful at communicating. And that's the main thing to remember. Again, we're striving to be more competent communicators. It's filling that toolbox with all sorts of things that will allow you to pick and choose the best way to communicate in a variety of different situations. And so just again, because you have a high level of self-esteem doesn't guarantee that you will be a successful communicator.